Welcome again and salam to everybody as we continue with this section of the life and death of Jesus, the passion of Jesus. Like I promised last time, we're going to look at the life and death of Jesus. But these can only come and be understood as soon as we understand what the Levitic, or rather the Levirine story of life and death entails. Remember, we are looking at parties that never believed in angels and life after death, especially the Sadducees. And so this was a national debate in Israel. And so the question of whether people continue living after death was a very big question and an age-old question. Like today, the way when we are looking at history and theology, we do not miss to mention about church and state. And so we are looking at this question from that perspective. So when you look at the Ravarite, you'll find the story from Deuteronomy 25, and it is a son of a man who marries and then he doesn't bear kids and he dies. And so the question of the this son having procreated, that responsibility moved to the brothers. I know in Kenya there are communities where if a son dies without siring a kid, one of the uncle did that if he never had brothers. And so it was people from the tribe of the father who bore that responsibility. Because in the Old Testament, which also includes the African Old Testament, or if you like, what we've been told that it is called the African traditional beliefs and religions. Your eternity was described physically or affirmed physically by the children that you bore. And so your name was to be carried on from generation to generations through the children that you are blessed with. It was the same case among the Jews. And so this brother again dies, the second brother died, the fourth, the fifth, and so on and so forth. And so Deuteronomy 25 taught that it is the responsibility of the family to make sure that that woman has given birth to the names of all these fallen brothers, or the first one, because that was the first priority. Now, they were trying to look at Jesus as a rabbi, and they were measuring his wit, because this, like I said, was a debate that had gone on for over 1,000 years and beyond, almost 15,000. I'm sorry, 15 centuries from the time of Moses. And even when Deuteronomy was being written at around 5th century BC, now as we know it today, we get the feeling that this was very emotive, and it was one of the political and religious questions then. And so the immortality of man, because they never concentrated on women, and this was something that was across board in Old Testaments. It ran across all races and creeds. And so Jesus answers by saying that marriage is only for the earthlings. It helps people on earth. In heaven, there is no marrying. And so it is for the purpose of this world. But remember, when you are created, God knows your destiny, whether you have children or you don't. And so this was not a Christian thinking, it was a traditional thinking, a cultural thinking. And so Jesus is trying to explain the new dispensation of the new kingdom. So he looks at this from the worldly view and the spiritual view. And so in heaven, people are spirits, so they don't need to marry and get children. So this is for these bodies only. And you can, personally, I think they missed that, especially when Moses met God for the first time in the burning bush. This explained that there is life after death to me, because God never said that he was, he said that he is, and he is their God. And so if your God is of all ages, then you should know that not even death can stop that, because you belong to God who lives in eternity. When we go further and we look at the the laws that had imprisoned the Jews and many other people in this world in their Old Testaments. Among the Jews, they had very many laws, almost 800, which I can count, and around 450 that were protective laws, and they had like 300, over 360 that were punishing laws. And so the idea of laws being used in faith was not an easy undertaking. And so when you look at these moral or ceremonial laws, the Shema becomes very important, which is in Deuteronomy chapter 6. When you look at Leviticus chapter 19, the one thing that I discovered while I was doing my undergraduate is when they talked about neighbors, they never talked about whoever stays next to you. Remember, these are homogeneous communities or societies. It is either this tribe or against that. And so for them, they were taught very well that they came from one father. And so your tribe did not matter, because at the end of the day, they never had different languages. They only spoke one language, which was Hebrew. And during this time of Jesus, they were speaking Aramaic, but now with an advantage of Greek and Latin. But the question of who is your neighbor was also very important. And I always say that these laws described a neighbor as being that person of your own kind or from your own tribe. And that's why you'll find naturally people will incline to the tribesmen and tribeswomen, and especially those in authority. And whenever they find themselves in a catch 22 where they're supposed to explain their oversight or their mistakes, they always run to their people, because this is where they feel safe, and this is where they will talk mother tongue and be heard. But remember, the proceeds of the wrongs that they did will not be shared among these people of ours, or our people. And so these laws are very technical, but if you understand what I've just explained, you will understand why Jesus rejected these laws. And so you read Hosea or Hosea, and you read Isaiah and Amos. For these three prophets, they really insisted not on following the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law. and doing the right thing. I mean, this is what really matters, because if you do the right thing, you will have done something that is more greater than even sacrificing to God. All right? It's because when you do a right thing, you'll sacrifice your good. And so it is better when you sacrifice your own good or benefit for another person to gain, other than gaining in a wrongful way, but at the end of the day, you will take your sacrifice to the temple and to the altar, and your sins will be forgiven. So Jesus is bringing this paradigm shift in a very soft and understanding way. And so and this is where I was talking about when the Shema, which was really held so tightly by the scribes or the lawyers of that time, it was seen as the way of salvation. But remember, in the new paradigm, Jesus is not the Shema. He rejects the Shema, but he doesn't change any law. But he does not promote Christians to be lawful people. He asks Christians to be godly people and doing the right thing, doing the will of God. And so these lawyers continue to test the opinion of Jesus on the Levirate, and Jesus brings in the parable of a good Samaritan. And so the good Samaritan is a very good example of the will of God and what we are supposed to do, as opposed to following some laws as Christians. And so again, he brings an allegory of the oil, the wine, the 2 dinar. He talks about, and he brings in the aspect of people who follow law. He brings in a Levite. And remember, these people are not going to the temple. They are coming from the temple. We are talking about a distance of 15 miles between Jerusalem and Jericho. But these people are coming from Jerusalem, going to Jericho. And so the Good Samaritan is coming from the temple, from the Gentile courts. The Levite and the priest are coming from the Jewish court, the holy court. But this guy who is coming from non-holy or semi-holy court does a greater thing than those who come from the holy court. And so that should be understood from that perspective. And so we can move on to David, the son of David, like I had mentioned earlier. This is very important, like we saw in Mark chapter 11. So in Mark chapter 12, again, now we're talking about Jesus having a conversation with the Jews. And so he looks at these from a suffering Messiah perspective, which is in Isaiah 11. And so the scribes could not understand this guy. Again, the suffering Messiah. So he moves from talking about the law. He comes now to talk about salvation, because remember, the Shema was the legal way to salvation. Now, for the Pharisees and the Sadducees, it is the temple that was the way to salvation. And so he brings them back and reminds them of a suffering Messiah in Psalms 110. And he continues to teach on King David. And so they say that King David was inspired by the Spirit. And Jesus tells them that for sure, I am not working out of the spirit of David, but David was inspired by the Spirit. But that is not the same spirit of David. David did not have a spirit of his own. He was being inspired by the Holy Spirit. And for me, I am not being inspired by what you say it's the spirit of David. I am he who is. And so it is a very controversial thing, and this is where now the blasphemous, the blasphemy question comes in, because he calls himself the son of God, that is greater than David. He can destroy the temple. You will see him in glory, and so on and so forth. And of course, he continues to expose the faults of the Jews and the Pharisees, and he tells them that you have been devouring widows, like I said earlier, and orphans, and eating the money of the poor, which is supposed to be collected. And by the way, this is how governments are supposed to work. When you give tax, all this money goes to a central coffers, and unfortunately Christians and other religious people have a right of complaining of double taxation, because if in where Christianity is a national or a state religion, there are no double taxation. So you pay your tithe from your payslip, like in Europe, and this money goes to the government, and so the government has an allocation for churches. And that's why there is a problem with Islam, because this tradition, they don't reject Islam because of its teachings, because Islam is going to change these laws. And so entrenching Islam into nationalism, like Christianity was, will take time, and it will take a lot of war, or rather struggle. And so, if you know Europeans as conservative people, they may not want to go through that path anytime soon. And so, Jesus tells these people that money collected according to Malachi 3 is supposed to go to the poor and to the priests, because the priests are not supposed to work, because if they work, they are going to go through the dubious means of getting profits and lying to customers and so on and so forth. And so it is protecting people who are serving God, and as well as protecting people from double allocation. And so these people are not helping the widows. In fact, the scribes were charging exorbitantly for them to case to case a matter that involved a widow. And so, because a widow is a woman, and women were not supposed to have properties, and probably their children are young, they used to circumvent the law in their favor. Like I said, Jesus emphasized on doing the right thing. And so these people were bad people, and they were not doing the right thing, and they were denying the rights of the vulnerable. And so if you read Matthew, it is consistent with Leviticus 27, where the obligation of paying tithe is very, very key. And again, Jesus starts judging these people because they don't have love, they're not exhibiting love. And so in the kingdom that he's talking about is all about love. It is not an outward correctiveness, religious correctiveness, or political correctiveness, but it is inside. And I don't know how they missed this. And you see, Jesus compares Abel's death in Genesis 4 to the death of Zachariah. Now, I will not know whether this Zachariah is the one mentioned in Chronicles 2:24, who was killed in the temple for rejecting the evil ways of the Jews. The prophet Zechariah was killed in the temple. Or rather, it is the other Zechariah, son of Baruch, who was lynched for having thought, this is much later, during the Roman invasion, for having betrayed the Jews to the Romans. And so it is not really clear to me, but he brings that aspect of Abel and his blood. And so the blood of the victims is always in the hands of those who victimizes them and denies them their right. And even if you die, this blood can never be lost. like we always say, the blood and the tears of the victims will always follow the perpetrators of the victimization. And so Jesus talks about liberty, and liberty was to come after even the apostles will see that the temple is no more. And so even the widows are going to get their liberation from there. And so I want to reach there, and I want to wish you all the best, all the blessing as we continue to continue to uplift our spirits in this journey of the Lenten season. May God continue to keep you well, and remember who you are and be who you are here in this kingdom and life after. Be blessed.